of President Trump and his administration. Through it all, Premier Ford has been clear, I've done this before, guys, that Ontario will stand up and fight. And that includes taking our message directly to the American people, that we can be stronger together, that our economies are built on shared trade, investment, democratic values, and cooperation, that America directly benefits from Ontario's clean, reliable, and affordable electricity grid. For years, Ontario has exported power to the U.S., supporting jobs and businesses on both sides of the border. We've kept the lights on in American homes, in American factories and farms. But when we, as Canadians, are under attack, we will use every tool in our toolbox to fight back for the good of Ontario and Canada. And today, we send that message, that Ontario workers can never be taken for granted, that if the United States chooses to target us, they will feel the pain and pressure too, and that is leadership. And that's why over the past days, we have worked to implement Ontario's plan to follow through on our Premier's commitment to stand up for our country and to fight back against this unjust attack on Canada's economy and sovereignty. And with that, it is my honor now to turn it over to the Premier, Doug Ford. Thank you so much.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I just want to thank the Minister of Education, Minister of Energy. I couldn't let that slide after calling me the President for that introduction. And thank you all for joining us here this morning. I want to begin by congratulating Mark Carney on winning last night's leadership race for the Liberal Party of Canada. It was an overwhelming win, actually. In doing so, Mark Carney will be our next Prime Minister. As Premier, I look forward to a renewed federal leadership, as well as time when we all sit down and have a great discussion. And it's never been more important to build big things here in Ontario and across our country, including and especially the Ring of Fire. To do so, the federal government needs to get out of our way. They need to get behind these nation-building projects so we can build a more prosperous and secure future for Canada. I also want to thank Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for his many years of service to Canada. You know, we didn't always agree, but when it mattered, Prime Minister Trudeau was always willing to put party and ideology aside for the good of the country. For weeks now, we've been faced with so much uncertainty coming from President Trump. Each day brings new tariff threats. Now, President Trump is threatening tariffs on steel and aluminum. He's pointing his finger at dairy and lumber, shifting timelines, different excuses, chaos and confusion. It's hurting workers, it's hurting businesses, it's hurting investments, and it's hurting families on both sides of the border. It needs to end. That's why I've been crystal clear. Until these tariffs are off the table, until the threat of tariffs is gone for good, Ontario will not relent. We will not back down. Pausing some tariffs, making last-minute exemptions, it won't cut it. We need to end the chaos once and for all. We need to sit down, work together, and land a fair deal. A deal that gives businesses the confidence to invest. A deal that gives workers the security they need and deserve. Until then, Ontario will keep up the fight. We will apply maximum pressure to maximize our leverage. That's why today we're moving forward with a 25% surcharge on electricity exports. For the 1.5 million American homes and businesses that Ontario powers, homes and businesses in Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. This surcharge will cost families and businesses in these states up to $400,000 each and every single day. On an average, this will add around $100 per month to the bills of hardworking Americans. Let me be clear, I will not hesitate to increase this charge. If necessary, if the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely. Believe me when I say I do not want to do this. I feel terrible for the American people because it's not the American people who started this trade war. It's one person who's responsible. That's President Trump. I'd rather be working together. I want to sell the U.S. more energy, more electricity, more critical minerals. I want to make Canada and the United States the richest, most successful, safest, most secure two countries on the planet. But as Premier, my number one job is to protect the people of Ontario and in hand protect the people of Canada. I will do whatever it takes. I will fight like I've never fought before to protect Ontario. Friends, none of this makes sense. Costly tariffs against your closest friends and allies do not make sense. The U.S. markets have lost trillions in value. Companies are second-guessing investments into the American economy. American workers' jobs are at risk as we speak right now. Cost of hardworking American families will only go up. It doesn't have to be this way. We are stronger when we work together. I hope we can get back to working together, creating jobs, growing our economies, lowering costs for families in both countries. We don't get there by easing up. We will remain strong. We will be relentless. We will do whatever it takes to protect Ontario. Thank you, and may God bless the people of Ontario. Thank you.
We will now take questions from the media. Please come to the mic and state your name and outlet. Just a reminder, it's one question and one follow-up. First question.
Good morning, Premier. Mark McAllister from City News.
Hi, Mark.
Our understanding is that it's not always the case that Ontario is offering electricity at a particular rate where we're making money, and that sometimes, because of the extra energy that is being generated in this province, we're more or less giving it away to some of those U.S. states. So how does a surcharge actually work in those cases?
Well, before I pass it to Minister Lecce, you know, we're over producers when it comes to energy. And in some cases, that's a good thing. We want to sell the U.S. more energy. We want to sell more states energy. But even if Michigan or any of the three states, what happens, what I understand, and again, I'll pass over to Minister Lecce, it may go to Michigan, and maybe that day they may not need it. They may need it too. If not, they'll resell it to, for example, Ohio, Pennsylvania. But it's going to affect many, many states, but I'll pass this over to Minister Lecce.
So we estimate that based on the 12,000 megawatt hours of power we sell the U.S. versus the 374 megawatt hours we import, we are 30 times a net exporter. They need our power. We have the supply and demand systems in place by our systems operator. We'll be okay in Ontario. This is about maximizing pressure on America and minimizing the impacts on Ontario. So when we sell them power on the spot market, as you mentioned, we're estimating $300,000 to $400,000 every single day of additional monies we're going to accrue in an account which the government is committing to putting back into the pockets of ratepayers to reduce bills for families and businesses. So if a state like Michigan flows our power through and sells it, as the Premier said, to Ohio, that means the impact of this surcharge is going to be reverberated right across America, not just in Ohio, not just in Michigan, rather, or New York or Minnesota, but now in all the states. They then try to resell and upsell our power. So this is going to have, you know, the Premier says we sell power all the way down to the U.S. All of the states, all along the I-95, they can feel the pain too. And it's regrettable we're here, but we're prepared to do this. And as the Premier mentioned, we have the capacity to scale this up above 25% if necessary.
Another quick off-topic question for Premier Ford.
Sure.
You had mentioned in an interview with our colleagues in the U.S. on the weekend that you're planning on launching another marketing and advertising campaign in the U.S. in addition to what had already been done. Yes. Could you outline that, detail that for us, and how much more is that going to cost Ontario taxpayers?
Well, I called information ads. We need to inform the American people. If they just hear one side of the story and they aren't hearing the other side, you know, their opinions might change, but we want to make sure we send clear message down to the American people. They're our greatest allies in this fight against these tariffs. So we'll get a cost, we'll be transparent, but it'll be the best money we've ever spent, because if we don't spend it, it would cost us tens of billions of dollars to our economy.
Morning, Premier. Richard Southard, 680 News
Richard.
Radio. Good morning. Your threat to potentially cut off electricity altogether, would that be on April 1st if Trump went ahead with additional tariffs? What would it take to get there, sir?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question, Richard. Let's just see how this rolls out. You know, he changes his mind literally every single day. So I just wouldn't want to give you an exact date. But make no mistake about it, if he continues to attack our province, our country, taking jobs, families' paychecks, food off their table until they can't pay rent, I will do whatever it takes to maximize the pain against the American, and I hate saying Americans because it's not them, against President Trump. You know, so many Americans I speak to and the elected officials and even the 3 governors I've talked to recently, you know, I start off with apologizing we're in this position, that we have to do this. And they fully understand. They do not agree with President Trump. Republicans do not agree, at least the ones I speak to, do not agree with President Trump, but they're too scared to go out there and say it publicly. It's a shame. We have to put an end to this.
On today's surcharge, you know, it's all well and good in the winter when we are exporting energy, but do we not need to import energy in the summer? And if there is some retaliatory tariffs, if this stretches on, is there concern about what this could cost Ontario come the summer months, sir?
Well, we'll make sure we have enough energy for ourselves. That's the #1 priority. And we're going to continue expanding our energy capabilities here in Ontario.
Hi, Premier. Barbara with QP Briefing.
Hi, Barb.
So we did have an increase in the use of natural gas as a source of energy here in Ontario, and a big part of this natural gas do come from the States. So sort of following up on Richard's question here. So in doing what you're announcing today, in taxing the energy exports to the States, do we have a plan in case they respond to tariffs in the natural gas that comes to Ontario?
Well, I think you're talking about Line 5 that starts in Alberta, comes through the U.S. and up through Michigan. Again, that's Canadian oil. You know, I'm very confident we have enough natural gas, and we're going to build on that. Do you know who's to be blamed for not having gas? All the elected officials for the last 20 years. They need to look in the mirror and ask, why didn't we build Energy East pipelines? Why didn't we go put another pipeline west? Why aren't we going north? This is where the federal government, no matter who gets elected, needs to look at national infrastructure projects that we'll never have to rely on anyone again in the world. I said that during the pandemic about the N95 masks and other items, and now we're self-sufficient. We can build anything here in Canada, and let's not be so reliant on the United States for our crude oil going down to the U.S.
So now off the topic a little bit. So yesterday we had Mark Carney announced as the next Prime Minister, and you said as the Premier you're looking forward to renewed leadership in the federal level. I'm wondering when do you expect to see an election?
Well, I'm guessing, and I'm only guessing. I hear anywhere from 10 to 15 days. They'll be going to the polls. I'm staying out of that election, but I do have some areas that we have to focus on. The Ring of Fire is a priority to keep us moving forward. We can't take 20 years and putting every assessment, every consultation in the world for 20 years and not get one shovel in the ground. So we need to make sure that any federal government, #1, gets out of our way, but also has funding towards that. The other big area that never went through legislation are the EV deals. We have one big one outstanding. We have our money up there, but it's Honda. You know, it's over a $15 billion deal, and the head person from Honda is flying in to make sure that whoever's in charge, the federal government, gets this deal done. It's a tax credit. I got to explain to the people. We're asking the federal government to give a tax credit, not a big chunk of money. And it's a very simple philosophy. You don't give the tax credit, all of a sudden the 4,200 people from Honda get up and leave, multiply that by 5, there's only 20,000 jobs at risk for a tax credit. So I will be all over all the leaders about making sure they commit to the tax credits, because look what we're up against. We're against President Trump, but will do everything he possibly can to attract these businesses down there. He'll do everything he can to get permits quicker for mining until they can be self-sufficient. We need to make sure we compete, and we need to have a wartime effort per se. And not military wartime, but economic wartime efforts. We can't be dilly-dallying around, taking 10, 15, 20 years to get permits. And we need to give certainty to companies like Honda and any other company that wants to invest in here that they will have a tax credit.
Good morning, Premier. Fatima Syed with the Narwhal. On Friday, BC Premier Eby said he'll be working closely with Ontario and the federal government to develop a coordinated approach to energy export tariffs.
Yes.
Can you tell us what that coordinated approach looks like and what Ontario's role is?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Premier Eby. I think they see income, if I remember correctly, about $1 billion. But it's not just Premier Eby. It's Wab Kinew, Premier Kinew, which is an absolute champion in Manitoba. We also have to look at Premier Legault. I have a call into him before I walked in. And then anyone else. I think New Brunswick ships some energy, Newfoundland. There's a whole bunch of us that ship energy down to the U.S., and we have to maximize it. And then we have to remember the 4.3 million barrels of oil that's coming from Alberta. As Premier Smith said on her comments, I think over the last couple of days, she has the trump card. Well, a message to Premier Smith, one day I think you might have to use that trump card and give approval for an export tax. Because you want to talk about a trump card, that will instantly change the game. Instantly, when the Americans, and I know the Americans, all of a sudden their gas prices go up 90 to $1 a gallon, they will lose their minds. So we need to at least put that in the window, but I don't direct any of the premiers, I don't direct any of the provinces, it's Team Canada, and that's going to be strictly up to Premier Smith to make that decision or not.
And going back to a previous colleague's question, you mentioned that energy will be a priority and you want to reduce dependency on U.S. energy. The plans Ontario has proposed so far, that your government has proposed so far, are pretty time-consuming. Building nuclear facilities is going to take a long time. How do you plan to increase those efforts in the wake of all of this?
Well, I'll hand it to Minister Lecce because he could probably condense it a lot quicker than I could, but we have a very, very strong plan, and I understand what you're saying, but it's not just nuclear, it's a multiple of different areas of energy, but I'll hand it over to Minister Lecce.
The first priority the Premier instructed me to do as Minister is to make sure we increase generation. So we launched the largest competitive energy procurement in Canadian history, 7,500 megawatts of power. And that is the first step we enacted. The second is we've expanded hydroelectric fleets in the north and likewise in Eastern Ontario, $2 billion investment to expand and really generate net new power. So we're using an all-the-above approach, leveraging every resource available to the government to ensure we have ample, affordable, clean power for the people of Ontario. And for the medium term, yes, we're looking at building net new nuclear, not just refurbishments that are being done on time and on budget at Darlington or Pickering, part of our intention there, but we're looking at a net new generator in Port Hope, up to 10,000 megawatts of clean power. Together, this will secure energy future, make sure we are not just sufficient for Ontario and Canada, but we can export more power as the Premier's vision has, as he's communicated to people of Ontario. We actually want to sell more of it to the U.S. and change the approach of how we sell it so we could really monetize, maximize the revenues back to Ontario so we could reinvest it in our people and our business.
Hi, Premier. Jeff Gray, Globe and Mail. Just wanted to address the question I think that somebody coming to this cold would ask, which would be, how can, in this titanic struggle involving billions and billions of dollars and President Trump and everything else, how could 400 grand a day make any difference at all?
Oh, it makes a big difference. You should see the uproar about the alcohol. And, you know, you take, they're called kitchen table issues. And this really will affect citizens or residents, I should say, in Minnesota, New York, and Michigan. And it's the same as taking our alcohol off the shelves. You know, with the bourbon, it really caught the attention of the governor and also the senator, Mitch McConnell. I want to thank him. He's the only Republican, one other Republican from Wisconsin, spoke out very, very harshly against the president's tariffs. So we win them over one at a time, and these kitchen table issues are absolutely massive. And they need Canada, and we need them. So let's sit down and negotiate a fair deal. That's all we're asking for, because the uncertainty is causing a lack of investment in both countries. The threat of closing down assembly lines on April the 2nd on both countries, it affects people. And we're so integrated when it comes to the supply chain, not just in the auto, but in every sector there is. So we're better off when we work together. And again, we aren't the problem. China's the problem. When we see, for instance, steel, he's threatening steel and aluminum. We know steel from China goes into Mexico. Mexico might tweak it and then all of a sudden throw a Made in Mexico sticker on it and get shipped up. That's unacceptable. We need to make sure every project we use is Canadian steel and preferably Ontario steel, but I know there's other steel producers in Canada. Either way, the $30 billion of procurement that we have, that's not including the $222 billion of infrastructure that we are doing over the next 10 years. So there's a lot of products coming up from the U.S. that has to stop immediately.
And a question maybe for both of you, just if you could clarify why just 7 days ago your energy minister said that you needed legislation to do this, but now you found a way to do it with the minister's directive and the regulation. Thank you.
Well, we talked to the OPS, the deputy minister, and Michelle DeManuel, and there's always a way to work around it, and they found it. So I want to thank them and for coming up with that. And we just need a regulation now. So good work to our ministries.
John McGrath, TVO. The nuclear reactor that we're building at Darlington, the small modular reactor, is an American design. It's going to be dependent on American technical expertise and American fuel. Given the current context, are we discussing abandoning that design for a Canadian-made reactor?
You're talking about General Electric and Hitachi. We're working in conjunction with them, with OPG. And this is a technology every governor and every senator and congresspeople wants to come up and take a look at our technology. That's the difference. We open our arms up, we open our doors up and say, come and take a look at what we're doing. We're leading the G7 on the small modular reactors anywhere in the entire world. And that's just gonna benefit us. So we look forward to continuing moving forward on the 4 small modular reactors, and we're gonna continue building on that and sell it to the entire world. I know Minister Lecce, who was over in Poland, a few other countries, really selling our energy. We're leaders when it comes to nuclear energy around the world. But I'm going to hand it over to Minister Lecce again, and you can tell him about your trip over in Poland and other areas that they're quite interested.
So keep in mind, our commitment with GE Hitachi is not just to build these in Ontario, but to ensure we leverage and maximize the Canadian and Ontario supply chain. And we'll be unveiling more in the days ahead about what that could look like. But expect a very high percentage of Ontario businesses to build out those SMRs. And we're proud to leverage that. And as the Premier mentioned, we're actually selling this tech not just into Europe, but even Tennessee Valley Authority, the largest public utility in America, is partnering with OPG, with Ontario. Like, we're leading in the G7, and the world is turning to Ontario to build out these small modular reactors so we could expand clean power, both in America and Europe and well beyond. So this is a huge value add for Canada. We're going to create thousands of jobs here at home, and we're really looking forward to seeing the first come in service in the G7 at Darlington around 2030-31.
Similar question about Bruce Site C. Are you going to instruct Bruce Power to narrow its plans to ensure that they use a can-do design, or would they be allowed, for example, to pick a Westinghouse or an American reactor?
For the refurbishment of Bruce, of course, they have can-do reactors. So over 90% of the supply chain is already leveraging Canadian. In fact, I believe it's close to 94% of every refurbishment uses Ontario and Canadian-made products supported by Canadian and Ontario skilled workers. So we have an incredible story to tell about making sure the supply chain is used, jobs benefit here in Ontario, and the money stays right here in the province of Ontario.
Hi there, Lorenda Redikoff with CBC News. Is there a chance that these U.S. states find someone else to supply their electricity? Is that a possibility?
I guess anything's a possibility, but they wouldn't be buying it off us if they could buy it off a U.S. state. We have to also build up our storage capacity, and we're working along with other provinces, be it Manitoba, which I always say Premier Canoe is an absolute champion, so is Premier Legault, and we're all working as Team Canada. So we're going to continue increasing our energy because we're going to need it. We're going to need it here in Ontario and to our neighbors. But wouldn't it be great if we get through this and we could sell more energy, more critical minerals to our U.S. friends and allies down there to make the AMCAN fortress even stronger? So that's what we're looking forward to working with our colleagues in the provinces and in the U.S. states. We have to get through this tariff threat.
You talked about the tariff threats that are to come, dairy, lumber, aluminum. I know this is primarily federal, but what are you looking at going forward that you can do on a provincial level?
Well, communicate. And if you ask the average American, do you know that you only produce 16% of the aluminum in the U.S. that you need? They wouldn't know that. Do they know that 50% of high-grade nickel that they use for their military and aerospace and other manufacturing comes from Ontario? They wouldn't know that either. So we have to be out there just hammering the message over and over and over again until they can put maximum pressure on their local congressperson, their senator, or their governor to voice their opinion.
Good morning. So we've been told that it may be impossible for Ontario to cut off electricity supply to the U.S. Could you explain to us what it would take to get it done?
Again, we just have to reduce the amount of energy we're outputting right now, and it wouldn't be nuclear, because if you turn down the nuclear reactor, it could take 6 months. But hydro, we could slow that down. And yes, it is possible. We've done our due diligence and made sure, is it possible? And the answer is yes, we can do it.
Premier, will you release a full budget sometime this spring with the full economic and fiscal updates and projections that we normally get in a budget?
Yes, we'll have a full budget coming forward. I believe we're going to be going back in the House. I think it's April 14th, I believe. And we'll present that budget and we'll move forward. It's going to be a very, very good budget. It will focus on the people of Ontario, taking care of them, protecting them, making sure that we have sufficient funds through new revenues that we see, as simple as the $400,000 a day, which is a big chunk of money that will be going back to ratepayers and business owners, as Minister Lecce said. But it's going to be focused on protecting Ontario and protecting Ontario jobs and communities and businesses. That's what this budget's going to be all about.
Hey, good morning, Premier Colin DeMello from Global News. Last week, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce said that up to 6% of businesses that they represent are thinking about leaving and perhaps relocating to the United States. We don't know if they're big or small. I'm wondering if you are aware of any business, big or small, that is looking at relocating to the United States as a result of this current tariff climate.
Well, I've heard the same comments, Colin, when 70% of someone's business or 80% of someone's business is being tariffed, and they have a concern. But I feel if we can get these tariff deal off the table, or these tariffs off the table, I should say, and get a deal, a USMCA deal, and sit down and negotiate it, the Americans need us as much as we need them. I sat down with a bunch of auto part manufacturers, and they're big companies that have plants in the U.S. and Canada. And their number one comment is, even if companies had to go to the U.S., they don't have the workforce to fill the jobs. Their number one complaint when I sat around the table with them, their existing plants in the U.S., you can't even compare them to their Canadian facilities or Ontario facilities in particular. Production's a lot higher up here. We're outproduce them. We have a better workforce. And they were saying a lot of times they don't even show up to work, and they can't get people. I remember one story saying they have 300 people they employ in a town of 3,000. So it really affects that community or that county. So they don't have the workforce to fill the jobs right now.
If there is a business that employs a large number of people in Ontario, as an example, that was thinking about moving to the United States, is the Ontario government willing to give them any kind of incentive financially to ensure that they stay here, similar to what maybe Honda or Stellantis or any others have received?
Yeah, great question, Colin. We'll put every option on the table to protect the jobs here in Ontario, because there's reciprocal jobs that come from those jobs. The auto sector is 6 to 1, 7 to 1. Other areas might be 4 or 5 to 1. And we'll do whatever it takes to protect the people of Ontario and their jobs. I said before during the election, I won't spare any expense to make sure that we take care of the people of Ontario and the businesses here as we did during the pandemic.
Hi, Premier. Rob Ferguson, Toronto Star. I just
Rob.
wanted to go back at something that was asked earlier, which interests me for years. It's in the summer, especially if we get a hot, humid summer, which we haven't really had for the last 2 years. But were we to get one this year and we're importing power from the States, I didn't hear a definitive answer on what's going to stop us from this electricity surcharge backfiring on us if states impose that. So can you or Minister Lecce address that, please?
Sure, I'm confident that we'll have enough electricity even on the hottest days, but without getting into the weeds, I'll pass it over to Minister Lecce.
So we sell 12,000 megawatts per hour of power into the U.S. market. We bring in 374 megawatt hours. We are a 31-time net exporter. So we are well positioned to impose this. We have sufficient, in fact, we have very strong supply and demand capability in Ontario. Remember, we have the capacity, including with natural gas and other levers, to dial up if we ever need more power, peak power. We have the ability. We do this every day in the summer or the coldest days of winter, or whenever there are high demand on the grid. So we have the infrastructure. It's why the all the above approach is critical to maintaining reliability. So the IESO is fully confident in their capacity to keep the lights on for Ontarians, and we're going to keep selling and keep producing the power for Ontario first. And as I mentioned, we're not just hoping for the best, we're leveling up. The largest public competitive procurement, expansion of hydroelectric, expansion of refurbishment of our nuclear fleet, Pickering, Darlington, and the consideration of Bruce C, net new, and the largest generator. All this, short-term, long-term, positions us well to be a net energy powerhouse. And the vision, frankly, once we can get through this madness with President Trump, is to sign long-term deals, make large amounts of revenue for Ontarians, and put this critical commodity to good work, good use for the people of Ontario. Right now, we think there's a lot more opportunity left on the table under the old system we inherited, which is why we're committed to changing it and improving it.
All right. When you just stay up there for a sec. So when you mentioned that that high ratio that we have, that we export way more than we import.
Yes.
So, couldn't there be periods of time where we are still importing? Like that's not a constant ratio. It does change from time to time. So isn't there the prospect that we could get burned at certain times?
No, because we actually signed an agreement with Quebec on winter-summer energy exchanges, which allow us that we produce more power during one season, they produce less. We already have a connection and a commitment from Quebec. We sell them power, they sell us power on a need basis in winter, summers based on our peaks. We have backup generation capability, which few provinces have. I mean, look, some have argued to get rid of our backup generators like natural gas. If we did that, we wouldn't be in the basis on the hottest day of the summer, pre-Trump, to fire up that insurance policy and keep the lights on for all of our businesses and families. We're well positioned to do this. We've thought ahead, and the Premier's enacted the largest storage investment in Canadian history, 3,000 megawatts of power to store power so that we could use it when we need it, including on those hot days of summer or cold winter days.
All right, thank you.
Hello. With a Swiss television question for Premier Ford. What about the long-term consequences? Are you worried that it might be the beginning of the end of a long friendship between your two countries?
No, I don't think we're there yet. I talked to a tremendous amount of Americans. They totally disagree with what President Trump is doing. Staunch Republican Trump supporters totally disagreeing with President Trump on this policy. So I think we have a strong relationship. It goes back over 200 years. We have, 900,000 Americans living here full-time, 800,000 Canadians living down there. We visit millions and millions of visits back and forth across the border. So I believe this is going to continue on being a strong relationship because it's not the people, it's the president.
What could you say to persuade Donald Trump?
I would say, one of his measuring sticks are the markets. The markets have dropped trillions of dollars. He has to understand. He's a smart guy. You may like him or dislike him, but make no mistake, he understands the markets. And Secretary Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce, understands the markets. And they also understand when the big three auto executives come in and say, you're going to shut down assembly plants on both sides of the border within 5 to 7 days. That's the supply. And he also understands when the other sectors were so integrated, the supply chain, when they come back and say, you just can't all of a sudden flick on a switch and create an auto plant overnight. It just doesn't work that way. So the more we explain the supply chain, and the more other people explain the supply chain to him, he has to understand. Even lumber. You know, this lumber war's been going on, you know, for the last 20 years. But the cost of homes are going to go up because they need our lumber. They need our aluminum. Just imagine if all of a sudden we shut down the lumber, shut down the aluminum, the steel, the oil, you know, the uranium from Saskatchewan, the potash, the nickel. It'd be a disaster down in the U.S. It'd be an absolute disaster. You know, he is trying to push us into a recession. That's how bad this is going to get. All because of one person. Everything was hunky-dory before. Everything seemed to be moving forward. Markets are up. Everything's going pretty good. Jobs are being created on both sides of the border. He gets in. Market slides. Threats of assembly plants going down. Manufacturing going down. People are going to lose their jobs. Inflation's happening all over the place. Because why? Because one person, President Trump? I'll tell you, the American people did not vote for this. And they have to think this out now. So put maximum pressure on your president. And I encourage the senators, governors, and congresspeople to do the exact same thing. Because there's one way this is going to go if he goes full steam out. It's going right downhill for both countries.
This will be the last reporter.
Good day, Premier Minister. Premier, last week you said that you were directing the deputy ministers to go through their ministries to see if there were other contracts, Starlink aside, with U.S. companies that could be canceled. So I'm wondering if any progress is being made on that front. Are any more contracts going to be canceled, and what is the value of those contracts?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I've directed the Secretary of Cabinet, which will direct the deputy ministers, along with our ministers, to use a fine-tooth comb on any contracts that we have. Some are already underway that were signed last year, but as soon as they lapse, we need to start focusing on Ontario-made products. And if we don't make them here, then we look across the country. And we don't make them across the country, I get it. You know, like there's some things we just can't get. But we do have 51 countries that we have tariff-free agreements with. Let's start diversifying our trade. We've been doing that, but we need to amp it up twice as much now.
Okay, thanks. And during the election campaign, you made a number of promises for the city of Ottawa. Voters there didn't exactly embrace those promises. Yeah. Your party didn't win a seat there. So I'm just wondering if your government will still go ahead with things like uploading the Ottawa LRT and the other promises you made for that city.
Yeah, you know, we did win a seat. We won one seat, lost a couple, but you know what, we're going to sit down, I believe, and once we commit something to move forward, but isn't that a disappointment? My goodness, you show all the love, you build the second largest hospital in the country, you're uploading a few $1 billion, taking the burden off them. We're uploading the highways and giving them additional money. Not sure what they were thinking, but I'm a man of my word, and we're going to move forward on it, and hopefully the people of Ottawa will appreciate the hard work that we're going to put in and that we've put in for years supporting Ottawa.
Thank you. This concludes today's press conference.
Yeah, these tow truck drivers' message to you, it has to come to an end. You're putting the community in danger, flying bullets around. We're going to catch you. You're going to go to jail, and you're going to jail for a long time. You know, this is out of control right now. There's a lot of great, hard-working tow truck drivers that work their backs off. They want to bring a paycheck home. They want to, you know, pay rent or pay a mortgage. Guys, get your head around this. You start shooting. You talk about, in tow truck words, the heat coming down. The heat's just turned up 1,000 degrees on each and every one of you. I will spend anything I can to put an end to this. Make sure we give the resources to the OPP and regional police to bring you guys down and bring you down quickly. And it's not all tow truck drivers. They're good, hardworking people, these tow truck drivers. There's a few bad apples, but those apples we're going to catch, and they're going into the slammer. So it has to stop immediately. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you.